Welcome back to Digging In, where we explore how to leave significant impact on the youth and young adults that we work hard to teach. Hiya, teachers. This is Neil Jepson. I'm glad to be with you. The past couple weeks, we've reviewed the learning pattern, and I hope that you can see all the way from context to feel and then apply. It's a process that you can go through all the time with your students. Occasionally, it will require you to step back and go back a step, and sometimes it will require you to skip a step. But as we learn this pattern and become extremely comfortable in it, our lesson preparation gets easier, we become better teachers, and we help our students to play the role that they need to play. Today we're going to finish up the learning pattern, but I've created a handout for you that I hope will be helpful. It includes all of the questions we've reviewed over the past couple weeks, all the way from identify and today to apply. Use it to guide your students and the discussion you'll be having about the truths that you will find. The learning pattern is absolutely critical to our success. Let me show you an example of a teacher who really nails it. So this teacher has worked really hard to understand the pattern and is working her way through it today in class. She here is showing her students just some content, right? She's asking them to go into the content. You'll see she asks questions, and then when they're not exactly sure, she'll ask them to go into the content. Go look. Go find out what the story is. So she goes to the board, and she begins to ask students to help them to write down the truth that they've identified. This process for her class takes just a second because they're very used to doing it.
30 seconds left.
Several students give responses,
Okay.
and she actually writes down a couple different principles that come out of the verses that they've been studying.
I will have a desire to become like him. I have faith, then...
She's begun the understanding process here where she's begun to clarify exactly what they mean by the things that they've written up on the board. She begins to ask them the major questions that you and me ask all the time. What does this word mean? Where else can we find this truth somewhere else in the scriptures? What other doctrines do we need to relate to this truth? Right? She spends lots of time helping her students understand what has been identified. And she works on the board for a long time. This is probably the most lengthy part of her class. I'm going to speed through it, but really it's at least 10 or 15 minutes where she's working through this principle and helping them understand its implications and exactly what we mean by the thing that we've written up on the board. I love what she does here. She's being a teacher, right? She's coming over and helping students remain engaged, even though they're tired. It doesn't make her uncomfortable. Here she had them look in the core document and identify some places where they really could understand the principle that they've identified. And here is where she begins to help her students feel how important the truth is. When you and me have spent enough time in understanding with our students, it becomes natural for them to share and to talk and to explain. And you'll see how she almost has to manage the discussion and slow students down. If I spend enough time in understanding, my students will automatically feel the relevance of what we've been talking about and desire to apply. The key is making sure your students understand it. You can see she jumped back into the scripture block and begins to teach some more verses to help articulate and help the students deeply understand why it's important and to help them begin to feel how they're supposed to act and what they're supposed to do. She does this masterfully, and we can do that once we become so familiar with the pattern that we're just rolling, right? We're going from one part of it to the other part of it and then back to the other part and it just becomes natural. The key is understand and learn the pattern. Not learn the scriptures. The scriptures take years and years and years. The pattern, you can learn it today.
Okay, so, what?
Here she goes. Watch how these students have felt the importance and are ready to apply it because she spent enough time in understanding.
He's doing these things so we get the reward. He's telling us the right things to do because he knows the right things to do to be happy and to get the reward.
If I have sure faith and a desire to become like Christ, then I will do good and strive to have the Spirit with me always.
Love it. Sierra.
If I have the desire to use the outlets of God correctly, I will have the power to become like God.
Do you feel it? Here.
If I listen and follow all the good things Heavenly Father has asked me to do, I will be happy and receive the best reward He has in store for us.
If I seek the Spirit, I will have the desire to become like Heavenly Father and will sow more spiritual blessings.
In order to become like God, I must follow His commandments.
If my students really understand the relevance, if I spend enough time helping them understand the relevance by the questions that I've asked and by the discussion that I'm leading and by the way I'm helping my students push beyond their current understanding, feeling will just naturally come. So as you work your way through the learning pattern and you finally get to a comfortable place where the students are beginning to make connections and you know it's time to apply, just simply ask questions like, so what are you going to do about what we learned today? How do you suppose you and me should change our behavior and our attitudes because of what we learned today? We need to help our students kind of work through exactly what it looks like to live a certain gospel principle. Rather than just saying, well, I've decided to come unto Christ, we talk about exactly what that looks like and how they're going to do that and what their next action is. Questions like this can really be helpful. Tell me more about what that looks like. Help me to understand what your next plan of action is. What's your next step in applying the truth that we discovered today? God will bless you and me as we help our students to work their way through this pattern. Remember, it helps them to be scriptorians for the rest of their life. It's not just a good teaching tool, it's how we study the scriptures. We'll see you next time.